Imagine this. You're deep in enemy territory. Your mission: steal a train. Not to rob it, but to use it as a weapon, a battering ram to smash the supply lines of an entire army. This isn't a blockbuster movie script. It's the 100% true story of the Great Locomotive Chase of 1862, a Civil War mission so bold, so unbelievable, it became an American legend. It all started not with cannons and grand armies, but with a secret plan to cripple the Confederate war machine before it could even get rolling. The year was 1862. Union forces in Tennessee were desperate to cut the Confederacy's main supply artery, the Western and Atlantic Railroad. This single track was the lifeline connecting Atlanta's factories to the front lines in Chattanooga. Sever that line, and the Confederate war effort in the West would starve. This is where a mysterious figure named James J. Andrews enters the picture. He was a civilian scout, a spy with a questionable past but incredible charisma and a taste for danger. Andrews convinced the Union command to back a plan that sounded like pure suicide. He would lead a small team of soldiers deep into Georgia, steal a locomotive and race it north, burning bridges and tearing up the track behind them. To pull this off, Andrews recruited 22 Union soldiers, all volunteers from Ohio regiments who knew exactly what they were signing up for. Their disguise was their most critical tool. They would travel nearly 200 miles behind enemy lines, dressed in civilian clothes, pretending to be ordinary Kentuckians on their way south to join the Confederate Army. If they were caught in civilian attire while attempting sabotage, it meant one thing: immediate execution as spies. On the dark, drizzly morning of Saturday, April 12, 1862, the plan went into motion. The raiders boarded different passenger trains heading south. Their destination, a small town called Big Shanty, Georgia, now known as Kennesaw. Their target was a sleek, powerful locomotive named the General. At 6 a.m., the train pulled into Big Shanty for a 20-minute breakfast break. The passengers and crew, including the conductor, a man named William A. Fuller, all filed into the Lacey Hotel dining room. This was the moment Andrews had been waiting for. In a breathtaking display of nerve, he and his men, 20 of them had made it too, were left behind. Quietly uncoupled the General, its tender car full of fuel, and 3 empty freight cars from the rest of the passenger train. Think about that. The conductor, the crew, and hundreds of passengers were just 100 feet away, eating breakfast, completely oblivious that their engine was being stolen right under their noses. With a hiss of steam and a slow jerk, Andrews and his hand-picked engineer, William Knight, pulled the General out of the station. The Great Locomotive Chase had begun. When conductor William Fuller stepped out from his breakfast and saw his train disappearing down the track, he didn't hesitate. He was a man obsessed with his schedule, and he was not about to lose his locomotive. What he did next seems absolutely insane. Fuller and 2 other crew members started chasing the train on foot. That's right, they ran after a steam engine. This immediate, almost crazed reaction was the one thing Andrews hadn't counted on. After running a few miles, Fuller found a handcar, one of those small, manually pumped rail carts, and pushed it down the tracks at a furious pace. Meanwhile, up ahead, Andrews and his raiders were stopping to pull up spikes and cut telegraph wires, expecting to have hours before anyone even noticed the train was gone. They were wrong. The chase became a desperate race. Andrews' men would stop to try and burn a bridge, only to hear the whistle of an approaching engine, or worse, the frantic clatter of Fuller's handcar gaining on them. The sabotage attempts were constantly interrupted. Fuller, for his part, kept upgrading his ride. He abandoned the handcar, commandeered a small yard engine called the Yonah, and then, in a stroke of luck, found a much faster southbound locomotive, the Texas. And here's a crazy detail: the Texas was running backward. Fuller had to chase the General in reverse, pushing its tender and a single freight car ahead of it, but it was fast. For 87 miles, the two engines screamed across the North Georgia countryside. The pursued and the pursuers were locked in a high-stakes duel. At one point, Andrews cut his 3 freight cars loose, hoping they would derail the Texas. But Fuller, showing incredible skill, slowed down, just enough for his crew to uncouple the car on their own engine, push the abandoned ones onto a sidetrack, and then get right back in the chase without losing much time. But the General was losing its fight. By mid-afternoon, it was running desperately low on wood and water. Andrews' men were exhausted from the grueling physical labor of trying to tear up the track under constant pressure. As the General limped into the city of Ringgold, Georgia, it finally ran out of steam. Its boiler was dry, its firebox empty. The chase was over. Andrews gave the order, abandon the locomotive and scatter into the woods. The Confederacy mobilized instantly. Over the next 2 weeks, every single one of the 22 raiders was hunted down and captured. Their fate was grim. Because they were caught out of uniform, they were tried as spies, not as soldiers. Andrews and 7 of his men were convicted and executed by hanging in June of 1862. The remaining 14 raiders endured months of brutal conditions in Confederate prisons before they were finally part of a prisoner exchange in 1863. When they returned to the North, they weren't seen as failures. They were celebrated as heroes. In fact, they became the very first recipients of America's highest military decoration, a brand new award created to honor extreme valor, the Medal of Honor. Tactically, the great locomotive chase failed. The railroad was repaired in just a few days, but it was a massive spiritual victory. It cemented a story of incredible American audacity and bravery into the national consciousness and helped define what heroism meant during the war. It was a mission so daring, so cinematic, it's no wonder it continues to capture our imagination to this day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this piece of hidden history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next story.